we're ready to roll.
What's up, BAM fans? Episode 3 coming at you. Got myself, Coach Adam Gowker.
Coach Jake Banwart.
Your boy JC, what's up?
Your boy JC. We brought in Z-list celebrity Justin Currington today.
If you don't know who he is, I get it, you know.
You can find him if you YouTube Not Top 10, Indiana University, and Top 10 though. There's a good one too.
You're on a not top 10?
I am.
What happened?
Routine fly ball. I was looking up and was peeking to see where the runner was.
As you do.
Dropped it.
Okay.
And then when I catch it, I don't even look to throw it into cup. I just do one of these. And then next pitch, they hit a home run. And I come running to dugout between innings. And
This is the best part. This is the best part.
I talk to my manager, like equipment manager. I'm like, Rusty, like, why'd you give me a hole with a glove in it? Why'd you give me a glove with a hole in it? He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, there's a hole in my glove. Like, this is unacceptable. Give me a new glove. Like, I need a new glove before the next inning. I need one.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, all right, yes, Justin. Like, I got you. And I'm like, thanks, Rusty. And then, like, I wait a second and I look at Skip. Skip's laughing. And everyone's, like, trying to hold it and laugh. I'm like, no, Rusty, I'm joking. I love you. I love you. So that was the funny part. But, yeah, the week before, I obviously made a pretty good catch. So I think I'm the first athlete ever to be on top 10. And then the next week, not top 10.
You might be the only one.
I know.
You might be the only back-to-back weeks.
The only person that might know the answer to that is Tim Kirchin.
Avid listener, though.
Avid listener to the
Is
podcast again. He is. And a major stats guy, which is what we're talking about today. So, talking about major...
Oh, sorry. I don't want to cut you off. But
you just did, but that's fine. I'll let it go.
That's what I said. It is your guys' podcast. I appreciate the invite and all. I'm just a Northsider hanging out with you guys.
Right.
Shout out Indy. Shout out 317 Northside. Pretty rip.
That's right.
Judge or Join podcast. Hey, check it out.
Check out
it's a little bit more mature audience. I'll just say that.
Right.
Also, but yeah, I'm the guest.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do my Le'Veon Bell for future guests. I believe since you guys are the co-founders, you guys should be right here, and the spotlight should be on the guests.
On Jake always sits there. So
right, I saw the podcast last week. It was a great one. Shout out Jake Wycliffe. Shout out. Mm-hmm. But I feel like the spotlight should be.
If you want the hot seat, come in. You know
what?
It's
I'm
after.
That's why I got a sweatshirt on.
I'm on probation after last week, anyways. I probably should
be
in the seat. Yeah, it's a good
musical chairs.
It's a good move.
Hey, shout out Subway. By the way, I had earlier.
You know you're D1 when you're just coming in and immediately making demands.
It's fine.
I'm more like a camera A guy. Headshot. I'm not a B roll.
Well, yeah.
Shout out IU. Those are some great.
And people commented on Adam's flow last week, so I made sure to not wear a hat this week, and now maybe they'll be able to see.
Looks good.
See the back a little bit too.
Well, I'm not gonna cut this until baseball season, so we'll see how Josh Allen said it looks. I can't grow facial hair, which sucks. Shout out to being almost 30 and never shaving. So
that's a blessing.
Is it really?
It is.
Yeah, you can get mistaken for 14-year-old.
You can only get carded. Oh wait, you don't drink.
I don't. Yeah. So we won't get into that.
Also, anyway, a lot of shout outs already. So let's get into the topic.
No, like I said, that's why I'm here. We're still going to talk more. We're not talking about sports. That's why I came here.
Are you sponsored by Subway?
We're about to be sponsored. That's what I'm saying. Eat fresh. What'd you guys get?
Okay.
What'd we get where?
For lunch, I got Subway. Chicken bacon ranch.
Double chicken chop salad. I'm focused on that fitness. I don't need that. I don't need those carbs in my life.
I know they're so good.
What did I have?
Carbs are so good.
Actually, I haven't eaten lunch. Actually, I think I had a Quest bar.
Liar.
I had a lunch meat tortilla.
Sponsored by Quest. I don't know if they'll pull this off of YouTube for us just to.
We'll get flagged. No way.
Yeah, we're definitely getting flagged.
We're definitely gonna get flagged and get this portion pulled from YouTube. If we get denied, we're gonna have to cut all of this out. So
it's gonna be bleep.
They're just gonna come in and wonder
bleep, and then we'll talk about
why is Justin sitting in this seat. But that's the.
We can face swap. Isn't there an app you can do that?
There probably is.
Face swap.
I love that all the bleeps aren't even from bad words. It's just from shout outs to companies.
And they're like, nope, we don't condone that.
We'll just input extra innings Indy South to every single person that you put in as far as corporation mentions.
Yes. Speaking of a shout out, we do want to give one. Our fast pitch program started last week, and first tournament for our 14U signature team came up a little short, but did end up in the championship game of their A-level 14U tournament. Had a really good showing, so shout out to 14U signature of Fast Pitch Academics Midwest.
And
it's a good start.
That is FAM, the FAM side of our organization. BAMFAM. So. But good stats for them this weekend. We're highlighting a lot of the middle of the order, showing off some of their sticks in the batting lineup, and it's a good thing, especially for this week, since we're talking about stats and the importance of it.
Are we though?
I don't know. We're talking about whatever Justin was talking
Apparently.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you want to go there?
I mean, I'm
You want to stop right now? You want to stop recording right now? No. Always join people. We can do some stats. Okay.
What, with the topic being numbers and just important stats that really, there's a million stats out there in baseball and softball. I'm figuring out what stats actually mean something to on-field performance, because you have a lot of different metrics that show you different things, but a lot of them aren't necessarily useful for an everyday person or a youth coach or whatever that is. So we did a little polling on the Instagram to see if people thought average or on base was more important, slugging or average, wins versus ERA, so some different ones on pitching and hitting. It's 50-50 on wins and ERA of who thinks what's more important. Most people think on-base percentage is both more important than average and slugging, which is interesting. And most people believe ERA is more important than WHIP. So those were the major stats that we threw out there. Obviously, we can't figure out wins above replacement at a youth level without a lot of other metrics and stats that we don't have.
Yeah.
But
That's
looking at what, it is pretty annoying stat, but figuring out like what actually matters. When we're looking at things, what actually matters in the stat category. What do we think?
So what do you say? For the poll, they said WHIP was third, ERA was tied with...
Was tied with wins.
Okay, well, I disagree. I believe WHIP is the most important, then ERA, then wins.
So what's WHIP? For those people who don't know, what does WHIP stand for?
It's your podcast. You let me know what WHIP is.
It is walks plus hits per inning pitched.
Yes.
So it gives you an idea of how many people are getting on base in each inning. So why is that more important than ERA?
Because, like I said, if you don't walk anyone, you're going to have a lower WHIP. If you have a lot of innings pitched, you're going to have a lower WHIP. If you don't give a lot of hits, you're going to have a lower WHIP. So that's very indicative of your ERA. Because if people get on base, they're more likely what? To score. If no one's on base, they can't likely score.
Sure.
So wins also, you can have a guy throw 80 pitches because they're fouling off or he's striking out the whole side, and then he can't get to the fifth inning. So therefore, he pretty much got the win, but he didn't on paper.
Okay.
It's one of those things where wins can get inflated because, like, you have a vulture, just like in football, you have a guy who scores from the one. You have like,
which are great for fantasy.
So
Shout out to Adrian Peterson for doing that
turn
last
back
week.
the
It was
clock.
incredible. Yeah.
So like I said, you got a lot of vultures in the middle relief, and even closers like give up a bomb, but then the offense bails them out late, even though your pitcher did all that work and didn't get rewarded for it. So wins are nice, but you really don't need them, I think, because it's a team sport.
Okay.
So as long as you win, that's what really matters. But if you're going to do individual stats, I believe it goes WHIP and then ERA.
So when we look at it from the standpoint of like Major League Baseball and Cy Young and how that works, why is it the case then that like one of the big stats they look for a Cy Young winner is always wins in a season?
I believe it is because usually you want to give awards to the better players on the better teams.
Okay.
Because, like I said, then the stats are sexier. Whereas you'll see, I believe, this next Cy Young, they'll start going back to the raw ability and the performance rather than the fluff, which is the wins and all that extra stuff, like DeGrom.
Yeah.
He's pitching a hell of a season. I can say hell, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I'll let
Shout out
That would be.
I think I said pissed off last week, which is
Did
fine.
you get flagged?
I said it this week
Some
now
angry
too.
comments?
So,
No.
yeah.
And I'm on probation.
And you're on
But it's
probation
fine.
for making
It wasn't that bad. I
It
saw
wasn't
the
that bad.
podcast.
It wasn't that bad. We don't need to read
No,
it.
Either it's bad
No.
or it's
You
not
don't need to
bad.
rehash it.
Hey, time out. Time out.
Yeah.
All right.
What was your opinion on that?
When I was playing, because I was thinking about it, I didn't laugh. I was thinking about it. When I was playing against a kid, shout out the Hip Brothers. All right, we went to Fishers all the time, and they would go in the championship. But like one of the brothers was a catcher, and they're twins, and one was a pitcher. He threw hard, but one leg was shorter than the other. So what we did when he was pitching, we would bunt.
Huh?
And
Why? Why would you do that?
because he couldn't feel the ball as fast as a guy with
Okay.
two normal legs. So
That's what you were
we
saying.
would bunt,
Mhm.
bases loaded,
Yeah.
bunt again,
Mhm.
because the catcher can't go out, and they had to pull him. And then after that, we swing normal.
So do you feel at any guilt selling that story?
Adam
No,
might end
because
up in this seat by the end of it. After that.
I know, musical chairs. No, I know the Hit Brothers. They're good guys, and we laugh about it.
Okay.
But at the time, I'm sure they thought like we were the worst team ever.
But do you feel guilty in the moment doing it and telling the story?
No, because I think I was like 3 or 4 every time I played them. So I love playing them.
So do you feel guilty telling the story, or did you feel? So that's.
I would do it again.
You would do it again. Okay, that's fine.
Right. Between the lines, there's no being nice or politically correct. Like they want to compete just like you, so you have to treat them like a normal person.
I'm not saying,
outside the lines.
I'm not judging or joining. I'm just asking
I was joining, so when he said
Only
that, I was like,
joining.
I remember a story.
Yeah,
so I'm
like,
bring it
boom,
up.
joining.
All right, that was a great time.
Joining.
So back to the DeGrom thing.
Yeah, an interesting fact about DeGrom, his team is terrible. We all know that. Mets aren't interesting at all. But based on his stats this year, he's 9-9. He hasn't even won 10 games on the season. 1.7 ERA, 0.9 WHIP. So less than one guy gets on base per inning. If the Mets would have scored 4 runs in every game that he pitched this year, he would be 30-0. 3 runs, he would be 25-1, and even just 2 runs to start, he'd still be a 20-game winner. He would be 20-6 if they scored 2 runs a game. That's it.
So what's the most runs he gave up in a game all year? 3? Is that what you're saying?
3
Wow.
in any game.
He also has a record for what? Quality starts?
Quality starts, yeah.
So what's the average run in a major league game? Probably 4? Most teams score, what, 3 or 4 runs?
I'd say 3 to 4.
And they couldn't even get him 3 runs?
No.
When he pitched?
If they just get an average amount, he's 25-1.
Do you think he knows that stat? And that's why he's calling his agent, like, let's get out of New York.
Let's go to Boston. I did see something, I can't remember who posted it, but it was like a list of all the MVP candidates with their stats. And for Jacob DeGrom, it just said, for his stat, it just said like 35 consecutive starts for not yelling at his teammates after they screw up everything that he does. There's no actual pitching
Do they
stats.
give a lot of errors? Do they give a lot of errors for him, or they just
don't score?
They just don't score.
Yeah.
Terrible offense.
Yeah.
Terrible.
He's doing his job.
One of his 9 wins, he hit a bomb in. And I think they won by 1. So he's
he's literally putting the team on his back.
That's pretty gross.
He also hit a bomb against Chris Sale in college. Saw that the other day.
Did he?
Good for him.
Where did DeGrom go?
Huh?
Where did DeGrom go?
I don't know.
No idea.
None of these colleges, either college.
I know Sale went to Gulf Coast.
Yeah, so it wasn't.
So DeGrom must have been down there somewhere.
Majorly huge.
Yeah, the field looked. I mean D1, but like smaller.
Not power conference.
No.
Never give up. Kids. Never give up.
Yeah, it was interesting to see.
Hard work pays off.
I would.
Plug.
I like WHIP as well. I think WHIP is a good indicator, one, of how deep you're able to go in games, because if you're not walking guys or giving up hits, you're going to be able to go deeper. I do think that it goes hand in hand with ERA a lot of times, because if more guys are getting on base, typically more guys will be able to score, but you do have those pitchers that get themselves in and out of trouble a lot.
So you're saying you have a good ERA because you have a good WHIP.
Most likely
you don't have a good WHIP because you have a good ERA.
Right, they're hand in hand. They're peanut butter and jelly.
Which one comes first, though? Like which one is the result of the other?
I think
that's what helps.
I believe the WHIP, because like I said, if you don't walk anyone, the ERA will not be.
So WHIP causes ERA.
Right.
Yeah.
And vice versa. So if you have a high WHIP, you most likely have a really high ERA.
The only guys that I can think of that have a higher WHIP and still a low ERA are like late inning relievers or closers who might throw real hard.
Yes, power
if
guys.
you're going in for like 1 inning, you can get away with a little bit of a higher WHIP in that inning if you're striking guys out. So high strikeout guys can get away with higher WHIP.
Right.
But if I'm looking at a starter,
those are like exceptions, like you said. You know that going in. They're exceptions to the rule.
If I'm looking at a starter, I'm looking WHIP. If I'm looking reliever or late end guy, I'm looking K rate and WHIP. I'm okay with
swing rate and all that other stuff.
Right.
So, but I agree. I think WHIP is the most important pitching stat to look at from every level, because you know if guys are throwing strikes then and what the damage that's being done is. The one thing that I wish was different with it, I wish it wasn't walks plus hits. I wish it was like WTIP, like walks plus total bases given up. Because like the hit, if it's a triple or a single, it still counts as 1 in WHIP, and I wish it counted as total bases. So we knew like if the contact against that guy was hard or soft as well.
Right.
And then it would be like perfect for me.
So we're basically saying, especially with the poll we put up, that everybody voting wins over ERA, and what seems to be the trend up until probably the last couple of years, that wins resulting in Cy Young awards as opposed to ERA.
Wrong.
And that it's wrong.
I believe so, but it's the marketing, and they did a good job in MLB to market that.
Correct. So where would you put wins then, as far as a ranking of importance?
Nowhere.
If
I rank
Nowhere.
them, bottom, the very bottom.
Right.
You said rank them, the very bottom.
Right.
It's a cool stat. It is a sexy stat to like see how many wins.
That's how you can rank them at that time.
And it is cool for like the pitchers to get a win and get that accomplishment and do that. I mean, we track them for our record boards. They're back there somewhere.
Question right here: Do hitters get wins? Why do pitchers get wins? Why don't hitters get wins? Win is what? We all won.
Right.
So why have pitchers win?
Yeah.
It's
I
pointless. I don't think. Because if you win or you lose. The Mets win or the Mets lose. It's not DeGrom.
Right.
Because he didn't hit the ball. Or
Right.
maybe he did sometimes. But, you know, eight other guys hit the ball too.
Interesting.
Like, if I go 3 for 4, do I get this Justin Kiernan get the W?
Yeah.
No, my pitcher gave up 6 runs get the W, but we stroked that game.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe wins are pointless.
In the same way, especially with youth pitchers, you get some youth pitchers who like have errors fielding the ball,
Right.
and then it doesn't count as their earned runs. But should it? Because they're the one who made the error. So I mean, it was earned against them.
So again, are you
personally,
going to have ERAs
you know?
for fielders now?
Right. Like you could.
No, I'm being
that's the
serious.
thing, you could give a stat to everything.
Right.
And that's why figuring out like which ones, because you could spend hours looking at stats and arguing which players are best, and we're going to do a little bit of that. But like you have to figure out what stats are most important to actually on-field production. For example, like we preach quality at bats. I love quality at bats. I think they're awesome. But quality at bats gives you the process. It tells you if the hitter is going through the right process, having the right approach. But you could have the right approach every at bat and still be a really terrible hitter. So quality at bats doesn't necessarily lead everybody to success. It shows your process is there. If you're skilled, it does. But you'll get guys with high quality at bats that are still bad hitters, or guys that get quality at bats because they just go up and don't swing because they're afraid of the ball at a young age.
Right.
So one of the ones we asked was quality at bats versus contact rate. And it was like 60-40 of quality at bats over contact rate. But I think even contact rate gets less important as you get older, because contact rate's important through high school because guys make errors. Once you get to college and the errors diminish, contact rate's not that important. Obviously you want to put it in play and give yourself a chance, but the difference between a strikeout and a flyout, there really isn't. Yeah, unless it's a situational flyout, but it's still an out.
Yeah,
Whereas at 13, the difference between a strikeout and a fly ball is crazy because you don't know if that kid's going to catch the ball. So you get way more out of it.
When the skill
Yes.
increases, that's when the contact decreases in the quality. So
there's a correlation for sure.
So like when you're younger, it's about contact, because if you can't hit the ball, then you can't work on it except the quality of bats.
Yep.
Once everyone's good enough, we don't care about contact. We know you can hit the ball.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the mental game, which is the quality and the approach. I agree.
So as pitchers, you're saying the biggest representation of your success in your mind is how many bases you're giving up, whether those be hits or walks.
Yes.
And I think it would probably be interesting to look at. Obviously, the most successful pitchers are the ones giving up the lower bases.
Yeah, and I would like to look at that from the major league side of like
So-
what's the whip of the top pitchers compared to their ERA.
So do you reciprocate that then to hitters? In your mind, is the most important stat for a hitter, above all else, is total bases?
I think it's the accumulation of total bases, walks, and hit by pitch. Because total bases does not include walks.
So pretty much your OPS. OBS, sorry.
Oh, well, no, OPS.
But
OPS includes total bases because that's your slugging.
Right, slugging.
And
walks.
But
yes.
your total bases also includes like if you were advanced by another hitter.
No.
Okay.
Total bases is what you create. So the stat of total bases is when you hit the ball, where you end up.
Right.
1, 2, 3, or 4.
Right.
Walks are hit by pitch. Don't count towards your total bases, but they count towards your OPS. So if I were to pick a currently already intact metric, I'm taking OPS over anything else.
I take runs for hitters.
Runs?
Runs.
How?
Okay.
If you're only creating.
What's the object of baseball?
To score.
More what?
Runs.
Than the other team.
But that goes against what I just said. Like how
It
many,
goes
how many
against what
runs
you just
you're
said.
creating, or how many runs are being created for you because other guys are hitting you in.
No. RBIs. No, not about RBIs. Because again, you can't get an RBI if no one's on base for you.
Right.
But you can't get a run unless somebody knocks you in.
Right. But I'm
So
saying.
So
No. You're right.
That's why I
No,
asked
you're right.
total bases
But I'm
when you
saying
said
you can
total
create
bases.
runs.
Yeah.
Okay, like I said, so if I walk, I steal base, I'm on third, and there's a wild pitch. You didn't do anything. I did. Or the hitter did.
So let me ask you this. When we're talking
Home
runs,
runs, I think overrated. RBIs overrated. Average and runs. I think should be the most important stat.
average and runs.
Average and runs. Do you get on base, and do you?
Well, getting on base isn't
score?
average.
And do you score? Like Mike Trout has 40 bombs every year, and he's starting to get what? Less and less RBIs. Because no one on his team can get on base.
Right.
But he's still creating 80 to 90 RBIs.
But
we'll
is
say,
that
like,
is getting
we'll say
on
half
base?
of them were like solo home
You're
runs.
saying we don't talk about RBIs. You're talking about your own personal runs.
Right, I'm saying he gets smaller
Sure.
RBIs because no one's on base, and he's still putting up stupid
Oh,
numbers
he's-
because he's
yeah.
creating the runs by hitting solo home runs.
So
That's
you
impressive.
mentioned-
So
That's
when
what
you say runs, you're including runs that you
Just
score.
you scored.
Okay,
Right.
but you score, but you physically score.
Right.
Because you touched home.
Right.
But you're also including runs that you've created by hitting other guys in.
No
No
That's
RBIs.
no RBIs. Yeah, no RBIs.
So then I think personal runs should be way at the bottom of the list.
Okay.
I
Because
believe
if you're creating, I'm talking about creating, like, if you're creating the run yourself, you're
Okay.
talking like you hit a home run
Okay.
and you score because you got the hit. Like, and then maybe you stole home. Those are the only ways that you can physically make it to where you score. Otherwise, you're relying on so many other factors within the offense to get you in.
I agree.
Are you though?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Based on, that's why I asked him total bases. So when you're talking about total bases, the total bases you create, you know, like offensively with a bat.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So that doesn't include steals. Because, you know what I mean? That doesn't include you getting on first and someone hitting a double and you scoring from first.
So I'm saying I think that's more important because maybe because I'm a speed player, I was.
Right.
And like you create opportunities for yourself. Because
Uh-huh.
like I said, if you can get a guy who can go from first to third, essentially hit a triple without hitting a triple, how valuable is that to your guys who can actually hit you in?
Right.
Oh, I agree.
It's huge.
Right.
And like I said, that's very important.
So then I
The
think
Royals,
you need to include with the run.
that was a great strategy they had.
Oh, absolutely.
Like I agree, every team should go to that. But I mean, like it's a power game. I'm saying you can still have half your lineup run
Right.
or create runs because if you hit a one over the fence, cool.
Right.
If you don't, they can score from first.
Right.
Whereas if you have a bunch of power guys and you just rely on the long ball, you're station to station, or you may strike out a lot, or you know.
That is me and MLB the Show, though. I will say that.
Oh,
Shout out to
the show.
JD Martinez.
Oh my God!
Cheat code in the show.
Oh my God! Diamond player. Hey, thank you by the way. I doubt it. I mean, I'm humbled. I owe you the crow. Yeah, I owe the crow. He told me to do Diamond Dynasty. I said no for the longest time. I did franchise, but I gotta give it to him.
Diamond Dynasty is where it's at.
Diamond Dynasty.
Diamond
where
Dynasty
it's
is where
at. It's
it's
nice.
at.
It's nice.
You
But yeah.
joined.
I did.
You didn't judge.
I judged for the longest
For a
time, and
while.
I finally joined this past
With
summer,
your
and I had a great
strategy.
time. But yeah, like that game especially, just long ball,
Oh, yeah.
long ball.
It's very backwards to say that whip is more important than wins.
Right.
And then runs is also the top. Because here's the thing, I think when we look at baseball stats, we do a lot of taking stats and like including things that we don't fully control in our stats. And a run is one of those. We don't control if somebody knocks us in.
Right.
Sometimes we'll score without that. Great. But not all the time. We don't control if we hit with guys on base to get RBIs. What we control is, are we getting on base? And in the nice words of Billy Bean, do we care how you get on base? No, we don't. We don't care. Just get on base.
Get on base.
Find a way on base. Can you steal bases? That's great. I love the stolen base category because you're creating more bases. And can you hit for power, which essentially creates more bases in less amount of time? And when we look at it,
The Adam Dunn stat.
right, the absolute stats of baseball.
Yeah.
But when we look at it, I like to take it in a sense that like a run is 4 bases. If you look at baseball in its simplest form, one run is 4 bases. If I can personally create 4 bases, even if they're not in a row, say I hit a double, I don't score. Next time up, I hit a double. In my mind, that person, that batter, has created 1 run. Granted, they might not have crossed the plate in that game, but they've created enough bases to score a run. So instead of runs, I like a category, and it's not there.
Mhm.
I've spent about 2 years creating a category that I think is pretty cool we can talk through, but I like taking out all outside factors, things that you can't control, and just looking at how many runs are you personally creating. What is your number of runs that you've created? And that's essentially what they try to do with wins, of how many wins you're creating.
The war.
With WAR, wins above replacement.
So define runs that you personally created. Define that.
So essentially 1 run equals 4 bases in its
Okay.
simplest format. So total bases, every total base is a quarter of a run. Every stolen base is a quarter of a run because you're getting 1 base. Every hit by pitch or walk is a quarter of a run. Every error so when you just look at hitting, taking out the defensive metrics of the ball, those are each quarter runs. So when you add those up, you can create or see how many runs you've personally created.
And you're not including bases are juiced, you hit a bomb. You're not making that 4.
So what? Yeah.
That is 4 because
Right.
you hit a bomb, so
Right.
you get. Oh, sorry, that's 1.
That's 1.
You hit a
I
bomb.
wanna
That's
make- I
4
wanna
bases.
clarify
Yes,
to
4
people
total
that-
bases.
People that we're not including
Who you drive in does not matter.
Does not matter.
There is a factor of being clutch in baseball and driving those guys in, and that won't go away. But at the end of the day, if you're creating 80 runs of just yourself and everybody on your team's doing that, people are crossing the plate.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of looking at how many did I drive in, well, where are you hitting the order? And what guys are on base? I mean, there's too many outside
I'd probably say
factors.
on base then. If I won't say, I'll probably go on base.
So
on base is, I
probably
like
do
on
on
base.
base.
I like slugging. I love the
I'd
combo
probably
of
do on
OPS because it's that middle ground between contact hitters and power,
Mm-hmm.
to where it gives a power hitter a little bit more leeway to not get on as much because he's creating more bases, and that on base guy to not hit as many home runs because he's getting on more. So I do like that from current metrics.
So do
but
you
I
feel
think
like-
there's a metric that could be out there that would
Do
be
you
better.
feel like that's the best way to go about assessing a player's ability to help its team succeed?
I do.
Because I think it's apparent now when you look at MVP races or Cy Young races, the way those things are voted on, you unfortunately are never going to be able to take out popularity into that. You're not going to be able to. But the way those things are voted on, then the stats people focus on when voting for those awards don't necessarily follow what you would assume would be the most successful thing. Think about like Ryan Howard, when Ryan Howard won the MVP. No one's talking about how many times he struck out. Like, I feel like if you strike out as much as he did, which it might have been 200 plus, it almost seems like that year.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, in my mind, if you're not putting the ball in play that much, I get that you're hitting a lot of balls over the fence, but you're creating a lot of outs as well.
And in the metric that I've created, I take strikeouts as negative 2.5 or negative 0.25. So that's a negative base because you didn't even have a chance to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Or at the same time, if you had a runner on base, you eliminated the chance to move them up.
But like a big guy like Howard, actually, he's striking out because he's trying to put the ball over the fence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But at what point
And
should
I
a
hate
hitter?
that.
I like it until 2 strikes, but at what point should a hitter realize, okay, I have a guy on second with nobody out, and I'm a lefty for talking Ryan Howard. Instead of trying to hit this over the fence in a 0-0 game, why don't I just ground out to the second baseman? Just put it in play and move a guy.
We don't know why, but I'm assuming because he has something in his contract that says if you hit this mark, you get X amount of
Sure.
dollars. So there's another factor, which is
Always.
not team first, which it should be, but sometimes it's like family and personal
Yeah.
stuff first.
Right.
And in my mind, if we're looking at baseball in general, the average kid or the people that we're primarily talking to are not professionals.
Right.
So, yes.
Or maybe, like you said, for the band thing, it's like scholarship.
Sure.
No one's going to pay if I go 0 for 3 with 3 ground out ball with 3 ground outs to second, but 3
That were
quality at
quality,
bats.
right.
If
They
I
don't
have
care.
a guy watching, he probably wants to see an extra base hit and maybe a nice single.
He wants to see some intangibles.
And that's the difference between high school ball and travel ball that we'll get to when we get to that topic.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's, I do think that taking a negative score for a strikeout is a good way, if you take all outside factors out of it, to assess a player. Because people who strike out less, typically that relates directly to having a higher on-base percentage. There's more balls in play, you're going to get more hits. Balls are going to find a hole somewhere at some point.
You're giving yourself a chance.
You're giving yourself a chance.
Right.
So basically, I take 0.25 for every total base, every stolen base, every hit by pitch or walk, negative 0.25 for every strikeout that you have, and every error that you have on defense. Because if you make an error, now you've given that guy something. What it doesn't take into account, and I hate, but that's where you get into crazy metrics, is did you save any hits from making incredible plays? Well, that becomes very subjective. Some people do, and there's definitely, like you look at Baez, he's got 14 errors, but he's definitely made some incredible plays. But how do you judge what that is and based on who's running? That's just impossible to track over a long period of time for a lot of people.
A lot of that's the eye test.
It
Right.
is.
Like outfielders
It
are out
is.
a home run.
Right.
Like,
Would
It
you
is.
rather have it short, taking out batting, Russell or Baez? That's a tough one, in my opinion.
I think Baez.
but then again, you can't say that because.
But it's
what's the
based
other
on
half-
Russell's arm.
What's
Right.
the other half of the game?
Right.
Yeah.
The hitting
Yeah.
side. Right.
Right. You're not going to DH for
need-
a shortstop
no,
being big.
Right.
Yeah.
You need a
understand
full
that.
player.
Right, you need a full player.
And
right.
because of that, this metric, like obviously certain positions get more chances to make errors.
Right.
So you're hurt in that sense if you are making more errors.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the closest thing to a full overall understanding of a player that we can get. Because when we coached together for the first couple of years, the constant conversation we had is who should be starting here? Well, why should he be starting there? What should the batting order be? Who should be sitting? And I think when you coach and when you play, at some point in time, emotion becomes a part of the decisions that you make.
Absolutely.
Because nobody wants to sit the kid that works the hardest. You just don't want to do it, even if they're the worst kid. Right. And in an ideal world, the harder you worked, the better you would be, but that's not the case with just talent and everything that goes on. So creating a metric like this takes the emotion out of it and allows you to just plug in the numbers. And granted, you don't necessarily going to follow them every single time, but you plug in the numbers and you can see overall value based on player and what they're bringing you. And what I found coaching high school last year was I had certain kids who struck out way too much, but they were really fast. So being able to show a kid like, hey, your best role and your biggest value on this team is to basically be a courtesy runner or a pinch runner, and look how your metric is going up in the runs that you're creating or your worth in numbers, versus when you hit, you're getting negative numbers for your strikeouts. So now you can take a kid and show him, hey, based on this role, we're actually maximizing your potential on the team. So every role now carries value versus everybody just wanting to hit.
Everyone want to be the starter.
Everybody want to be the starter. So if you can maximize roles of people by showing them this and they can see value in what they do, I think it gives kids something to play for, to keep focus on this rather than on, well, I have a scout here, I'm down on two,
also,
I'm
like you
going to
said,
hit.
keeps them in the game and part of the team, because like before, if you didn't have this metric, once the kid's out of the starting lineup, they're checked out.
Yeah.
Because it's all about me.
Mm-hmm.
But now you're still including the kid, even though you're not starting, you still can help this team win.
Yeah.
And like, we're not going to disregard you now just because you're a bench warmer or on the bench. No, we need all 12 or 15 or 25 when you're older. Yeah, we need everybody to get this win. That's why, again, I don't think you should have wins to the pitcher. It should be for the team.
And it's such a historical game. To take wins away at this point, I don't think would be good. But I don't think we need to place as much emphasis on wins.
No.
Like they were talking the other day on ESPN about the Red Sox having, of all their pitchers, they have a really good staff, but none of them have a win in the playoffs. So they're all worried about how they're going to be in the playoffs. Well, Chris Sale's still Chris Sale in the playoffs.
Exactly.
And David Price has struggled, but he's still David Price. He's going to be tough to hit. And I mean, I don't think that matters when you're looking wins.
Also, they're in the playoffs. That means the top 8 teams are playing.
Yeah,
it's no more Reds or Tigers. You're playing really good baseball teams.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
You're
going
to struggle. It's going to be hard.
The Cubs seemingly every year, once they get to the playoffs, it's like, where did their bats go?
Mm-hmm.
They're not playing the Reds 16 times.
Right.
In the playoffs.
They're playing some Cy Young runner-ups or winners.
Yes,
It
that's
gets
why
hard.
they mess with DeGrom and stuff like that.
Syndergaard,
all those guys.
That's what gets fun.
Yeah.
It's almost here, boys.
So for the fun of it, what I did today, and I came in today and they were like, you have papers, what's wrong with you? Yeah, I prepped a little bit.
Yeah.
But because, like I said, this took 2 years to develop this metric, and we call it WIN, or worth in numbers. So it's an acronym for WIN. Yeah, because your worth in numbers determines if you're winning games. I put the top 5 to 6 National League and American League MVP candidates through this metric to see where they stood based on this, and where they stood just from the eye test and stat test of what we thought, of who should win in each league, or who the top players were in each league. And I think it's really interesting to look at. And I did the same thing. We do BAM awards at the end of the season, and last year we had a heated debate over our MVP, and there were a few different guys that it could be. All of them had incredible numbers, so it wasn't like we were choosing between scrubs by any means, but it was splitting hairs, really making a decision. So I put them through it to see, did we pick the right guy based on our numbers? And again, it doesn't cover absolutely everything, but it was interesting to see who was up there and who wasn't quite as far up there based on like our top 5 guys that we looked at for MVP as well.
Right.
So be interesting to look at. The big debate that everyone's talking right now is Yelich or Baez in National League Rookie of the Year, National League MVP. And I think we're all in agreement as 2 Cubs fans here, but I think Yelich should be the MVP.
Right.
Before doing this.
But the thing is, when we're talking about MVP races, and this was a question I wanted to bring up earlier, we're talking about our rankings of importance of what stats are on the defensive side, the pitching side, the offensive side. Like when you guys are thinking about MVP type numbers and Cy Young type numbers, nobody, I think, going into a room voting for those is thinking the exact same thing as far as importance of those stats.
I agree.
For example, like the year that Chris Bryant won the MVP, I thought it was ridiculous. I thought,
even as a Cubs fan,
I thought it was ridiculous that he won. I understand how many home runs he hit, But when I looked at Daniel Murphy that year, his average was way higher. His strikeouts was, drastically lower than Chris Bryant's, but Chris Bryant nearly ran away with the thing. And so I think going, into these conversations,
No, I agree.
this is a finite metric that we're putting together.
But
right
again,
now.
you guys
and
have,
we can disagree with the numbers of what we see here.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
guys
know.
have.
I'm basically
an organization-
prefacing this that the guy that won MVP last year, I don't care what this says, should have won. So
Again, you guys are running an organization. You're not running a multi-billion-dollar league. Would you
Yes.
rather have the 30-year-old? There you go. Would you rather the 30-year-old Murphy win it in Washington? It's not a big market, but it's not a small one.
Right.
Or would you like to have a large market, young, up-and-coming guy on a young team win it?
So you're saying
Just like the Derrick
the
Rose,
league
LeBron
has an
James.
influence of
Yes,
that?
it's a
Absolutely.
marketing.
Yeah.
Right. It's good for baseball to have a young, big, strong, hit home run guy from
Right.
Chicago.
Which is what's going for Baez this year over Yelich.
See.
Is you got Chicago versus Milwaukee.
Milwaukee.
I think whoever wins that division will get the MVP.
I think Yelich gets it no matter what.
I hope he does.
Right.
He had 2 cycles.
I think Yelich should get it.
Yelich.
If they Yelich, whatever. I think he should get it regardless if they were to make the playoffs.
No, they're gonna make the playoffs.
No, but
they're
I'm
gonna-
saying like I don't think that the MVP
Should be based
should
on,
be
I got
based
you.
on
Who-
your team making the playoffs because we talked about
Right.
there's so much other stuff.
Should be.
Do the
Should
Brewers
be.
win or do the Brewers not
Should
win?
be.
Shout out
You know
to
what I mean?
Derek Jeter though in the Marlins for that fire sale. Huh?
Yeah,
Getting rid of
Yeah.
Yelich and
Yeah.
Stanton and
Everybody.
He's just a
Ozuna.
What do they
guy-
get? They
They're
got
going to have a
prospects.
lot of players in the playoffs this year.
Yeah,
Right.
well.
A
But
lot of guys.
he had to do it. Jeter had to do it.
Jeter had to do it because
He had to clean
wants
the
do
books.
it. He wants to do it his
Right, he
way.
had to clean the books, get some
They didn't have a
pieces
ton of
for it.
money signed, wrapped up in Yelich. They didn't have a ton of money wrapped up in him. So you could have kept
And
him.
he was under contract.
You know what I
That
mean?
was a stretch.
Right, he was under contract.
Yeah. So, but it's I think
He's actually
I think
discount
his is an
for
ego
sure,
thing.
yeah.
I think if they win the World Series, he wants to be able to say
Did
it's
my
because
work.
I brought everybody in.
He'll
It's
do
how I
it. He'll do it. I'll give him 10 years. He'll do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Anyway, go ahead. So yeah, what I was basically saying is that we're all going to have different opinions as far as voting for that of what's the most important thing. And like I said, for me, I think strikeouts are the worst thing you can do as an offensive player.
Right.
But some people are more okay, with Bryant striking out so much because he hit
Right, it's a give and take.
12 more home runs than
And I do think there's a give and take there, but there's a difference in a guy that hits 20 more home runs striking out 15 more times than a guy who hits 10
Right.
or striking out 80 more times.
right, which he
I-
struck out more than
Right, I would expect that a higher
Right.
power guy has more strikeouts,
Because
Right.
he's trying
but
to get
it should be on a sliding scale of what's acceptable
Right.
for that based on the power that you're asking him to try to create.
Right.
So I do think that there's something to be said for that. But from the NL side, we looked at Yelich, Baez, Lorenzo Cain, who actually has the highest WAR, wins above replacement, of anybody in the NL position player wise.
Right.
Nolan Arenado, Matt Carpenter, Paul Goldschmidt, and Trevor Story.
Carpenter.
And Trevor Story's having an incredible year for a shortstop offensively.
See, I don't like that how people just say for shortstop.
You know what? You're right. It's
He's
for
having an
anybody.
incredible, for anyone, he's having
anybody.
an incredible year. But now, it's changing because you see the young shortstops like a hit
Yes.
now, as it should be. You shouldn't just have like a defensive
You're a little more
stopper.
of a skill.
Yeah, at shortstop. Like
Stuff.
everyone has to be hit.
Yeah.
Everyone has to hit. Even though I get why they have the defensive guy at shortstop, because most likely the ball's gonna be hit to you.
Sure.
And if you can't hit it, they usually also put you down the lineup. But now you see most of the shortstops can field it, can throw it. They hit middle lineup now.
Mhm.
So I like.
Before you get into who and what, talk about just these. You have these top categories here
Yep.
of everything that you have that help make up this metric, and we're gonna. It's gonna be interesting to see what's not included.
Yeah. So like we said, total bases. So a single is 1, a double is 2. If you move up on a hit, that is not included. Anything that somebody else helps you create or helps you
Now,
get
let me
is
stop
not
you.
included.
We'll say these are the big leaguers.
Uh-huh.
So Christian Yelich usually hits 320 to 330.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but he's usually hit those home runs. We'll say Trout hits 300 to 330.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say he hits that for 8 years in a row, 9 years in a row. That's not MVP numbers. That's just Mike Trout. Whereas if we have
Mike Trout's career average, I think, is 307.
exactly, so that's Mike Trout doing Mike Trout
Right.
things. Now we'll say we have Joe Blow on the Cardinals, lifetime minor leaguer, hits 340 and 40 bombs. That's MVP season.
Right. At some point, you are battling your best season.
Right. You're kind of like LeBron and Mike Trout. They're kind of not screwing themselves because they set the bar so high for themselves. If they hit 340 and 40 bombs, like that's
where it's funny to look at Bonds in like 2002 and 2004, two of his best seasons ever. He had his 73 home run season in 2002, but 2004 he hit 48 bombs. But he hit like 378, and his intentional walks and walks were like at 200. He only struck out like 56 times all season.
He got intentional walk 120 times,
right,
and still hit 45 bombs.
Right. By like all statistics, and I actually did this for him, and breaking it down of worth it numbers by game, he was almost at one full run per game.
Come on, can we just take a moment of silence?
Absolutely.
For that 2004 season.
For steroids. Sorry, for Bonds. Good.
All right. Holy cow!
Yeah, we need to talk steroids in baseball one day.
That actually,
Judge or join. Judge or join.
I am.
Join.
I want to talk.
Not yet, kids. Not yet. Wait till you're older.
So total base is just what you create on a hit. Stolen bases.
Okay.
Strikeouts is a negative, and these are all .25.
Okay.
So a quarter of a run is what each base essentially is. So strikeouts is a negative quarter of a base. Hit by pitch and walk is plus .25. Error is minus .25.
Right.
So this is the total accumulation of those stats, and then all added up to figure out what that total win is or worth the numbers.
Okay.
And then we break that down one step further into a decimal of per game, because if one guy plays 162, one guy plays 148.
Oh, so it's not just 162 across the board. It's what they actually play.
Yes. Okay. So their total divided by the games played, which when we do that for the travel programs too, you have short season and long season for before high school and during high school, which makes that a fair metric to really compare players who played 20 games versus 40. Mm-hmm. So that's where we get this total number.
All right. What we got?
So it's not perfect, I get that. but I think it's selfishly, I think it's the closest thing to a full representation of a player's worth that we have in the game of baseball right now.
All right.
And we would all agree that Yelich should win it, and Yelich did in this.
Okay,
so Yelich, his total worth in numbers would have been 69, and he's averaging .496 runs per game that he creates. Where he killed it was total bases is huge, but he's stolen 20 plus. He's at 21. He struck out a decent amount at 130, but still 67 walks and hit by pitch. So he's getting on base. He's finding ways to get on base. And you see some of the other guys like Baez is actually of Yelich, Kane, Arenado, Carpenter, Goldschmidt, Story, and Baez. Baez is the worst. Baez should not even be top 5 in MVP voting. He has struck out 158 times to only 40 walks or hit by pitch. So the dude doesn't get on base. He hits when he hits it. His average is decent. It's the 290s.
That's if he hits it.
But his on base is not great.
That's what you missed.
So, and he's got 14 errors. He's still stolen 21 bases. But his overall worth in numbers is .34 per game. I mean, that adds up. When you're talking 162 games and it's a difference in .15, that's going to add up.
So now I also have a question, because usually shortstops will say, historically speaking, can't hit, so there goes their total bases and all that.
Yep.
And also, they get the most chances to make an error.
Yes.
So therefore, they're kind of screwed, whereas outfielders usually can hit, and they don't make any errors because there's not that many balls hit to them.
Right.
And also, first baseman usually can hit, and they're not that many balls. They usually catch the ball.
I agree.
So now, do DHs get to come in here, or no?
Yeah.
DHs are allowed.
DHs are allowed, and Chris Davis is included in the next one as a DH, so that's interesting to look at. Right. But he's put up big numbers. He has. So it's interesting to look at. And that's where I think it would be awesome to be able to include, especially for those middle infielders, really for all positions, like bases saved on spectacular plays. But that puts in more of that human perspective of, was it really saved? Is it a play, again, that you're competing against yourself?
Thank you. Like I said,
like there's a play that I expect Baez to
You're getting
make.
paid, Jake. I expect you as the GM and the owner to be like, yeah, I pay him millions of dollars to make that play.
Right.
Like, why is everyone so happy?
But the expectation of Daniel Murphy and Javi Baez making the same play at second is different. So that metric becomes very subjective.
Right.
And we're looking for the most objective metric that we can come to. It's impossible to do.
So when we talk, though, you mentioned Javi Baez is the lowest in this ranking of 7. So when we talk about the most important metric in baseball, why in everybody's mind is the debate on ESPN and MLB between the guy who's in first on this metric and the guy who's in last. And it's because of the things that aren't included in this that people are focusing on. So in your guys' mind, if you're going to be picking an MVP guy, what are the first 3 to 5 things you're looking at when you're making that decision?
Are you talking MVP of any team, or are you talking specifically Major League Baseball? Because I think they're different.
Yeah, they're definitely different. In Major League Baseball is its own, and I think realistically everything else is together based on how you got to recruit it. But Major League Baseball, you're talking about money spent, and stuff like that,
right.
based
markets,
on different values.
Sports Center's putting
but
on.
But if you're picking Major League Baseball MVP, immediately when you're looking at that stat line, what are the 3 to 5 things you're looking at? Because that's the telling story. That's what's saying Yelich or Baez. Because for people looking at certain things,
our opinions really don't matter because they've already marketed it as average, runs, RBIs, stuff that's sexy, and like I said, offense gets people excited. No one wants to see a 1-0 game unless you really love the game, because then you know why it's 1-0. And a casual fan drinking beer like once a night is gonna be like, this is so boring. What am I doing here?
Hopefully it's not once a night, otherwise they got other problems.
Well, and for instance, like Trevor Story's having a pretty good year for a shortstop, but I wouldn't even discuss him in the MVP race because I think his average is too low. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm talking about. Like in your guys' mind, when you're looking at that stat line, what do you look at? What do you want it to be? You know what I mean? Like, are you looking at average, RBIs, slugging percentage, on base percentage?
On base, runs, average.
Mm-hmm. For me, I'm looking
OPS.
Yeah, I'm looking. My top 3 are OPS, average, and strikeouts. Those are mine.
Well, I think average goes into OPS.
I get that's kind of crazy, because most people don't care necessarily about the strikeouts. But I'm just sorry, if you're creating, it's one thing to create runs yourself, but if you're also creating that many outs, I get that you're swinging for the fences, but if you're striking out, 120 times more than a guy, you better be hitting 30 to 40 home runs more than
the things though. It's very hard to score, obviously, because DeGrom could be 30-0. Right. So that's why home runs and doubles are such a premium, and that's why people get paid. So that's why guys are willing to go 3 or 1 for 4 with a bomb, because it's so hard to score a run. I put 1 up on myself, so I'll take 4 chances trying to hit that 1, and when I connect, it's a big deal.
It's really hard to score runs when you're not getting on base. Because
but they're taking the risk.
Yeah.
They know that going in. Like, if I swing as hard as I can or I dip a little bit, I probably will miss this ball or pop it up.
Right.
But if I hit it square or I time them right, that thing's gone. And they're taking that calculated risk at that level. Mm-hmm. This lower level, you can't do that. Right. Like I said, you have to really minimize the strikeouts. You got to put the ball in play, make them beat you. At that level, it's like routine BP.
So do you agree or disagree with that being a bases guy before a runs guy? Because if it's a bases thing,
it depends on the level.
I'm a bases guy. I really am. And I'm OPS 100% is the first thing I look at. I think I'm a defense guy too, and it's harder to track defense. But that's one of the things I look at is, take errors out of it. Are you saving runs, or are you finding a way to make plays on defense in big situations? And Baez and Yelich both do that. They're both very, very good defenders. Arenado is probably my favorite player in the game right now.
I like Machado.
I like Machado, but Aaron, I don't know. I've always really been a fan of Arenado. But same thing, he can flat out pick it on defense, and he can hit. So I like that combo. I do think an MVP needs to be a two-way guy. I don't think a DH should ever win MVP because that's only half the game.
What happens? 60 home runs, $130, hit 400. Is he MVP? The DH?
No,
because when they're talking about these MVP races, when you're talking about these
stupid numbers, I agree.
How many discussions on TV have you guys seen as far as MVP races? How many of them have you seen them include the fielding percentage of these guys?
No fielding percentage. But what you hear, the one thing that Baez has going for him that I totally agree with is his ability to play multiple positions helps a team. Yes. So if you take the name of the award, the most valuable player,
that's also
his ability to be valuable to a team when Bryant goes down with an injury and he can play third.
Right.
And suddenly Russell is off for reasons.
Personal reasons.
And he's going to short and he can play outfield. He's played second at a high level. I mean, that's huge value to a team, and that's some of the stuff that you don't get in stats.
He should be an MVP.
Right, Jacob DeGrom should probably be the MVP,
to the team.
just flat out.
That's value to the team.
And again, that's the historical where pitchers don't typically win it, and they have to be insane. 30-0 would have done it, but his team ruined it for him. So when you look at it, I also think there's something to be said for the fact that Baez wears a chain, has an MLB tattoo on the back of his neck, takes a few seconds on his home runs, and he's a fun player
He's a
to watch.
showman. Yeah.
He is.
Right.
And it's a game now where we want a showman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I love Christian Yelich, because he's really not as he is, but in a quiet
He's sneaky,
kind of way.
He's
Right?
sneaky
Yeah,
funny.
he's very. You can tell he's confident, but he's not over the top with what he does.
Right.
So I don't think there's a perfect way to do it. I do think most people probably look at home runs, RBIs. Average needs to be probably above 270, but I don't think it needs to be. No, I know, but I don't think it needs to be in the threes.
I think it has to be in the threes.
I'm saying for the general voters, if you're above 270 and you have 40 plus bombs, they probably are.
It's a give and take.
I'm not interested in an MVP that's batting 275. I'm just not.
Well, if he has 50 bombs, you get it. You're like, okay.
I don't.
Oh, you don't?
I
Okay.
do not. Like, because total bases or getting on base. Like, if you're having low batting average, you're not getting on base and creating those runs. Like, yeah, you hit 50 bombs, but how many outs you're
No, I'm with
when
you.
you're limited.
I'm with
to
you.
20
It's just that
I would
the way it
change
should
that.
I think
be.
that's crazy.
The way it should be and the way it is. And unfortunately, the way it is the way that
When was the we need to look this up. When was the last
No,
time?
don't do your research.
Last time a guy won MVP batting lower than 290.
I don't know.
You know
It'd
what I
be an interesting
Because
thing to see.
Altuve last year batted like
Jesus.
340.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
I would take Altuve over a guy hitting 60 plus home runs every year. I would. When you talk about
But
That's not too bad, like 20 himself? 20,
Yeah,
30?
So maybe for
But
that.
now
If I knew the power
Is
numbers
it the
were
park
coming.
though? Because he smells
Some
a
of it's
little
the
short porch.
And that's where Story doesn't get as much credit because he's playing at Coors.
Right.
So you get
Again,
some
you
of
have to
that.
factor
would you rather have Jose Altuve or Bryce Harper?
Altuve.
Altuve.
Exactly. That's what I'm
I'd
talking
rather
about.
watch Harper.
Yeah.
But again, that goes back to the showman style.
I wouldn't.
I think he's more entertaining.
Now,
Right.
like, look at these
But-
numbers. The AL is kicking their.
The AL
But-
is a way better hitting league.
Is it because they have the DH and guys can take a couple days off and be a DH?
It's because Jacob DeGrom's in the NL. That's why.
No,
Why is it usually the pitching in the NL? Well, because the pitchers have to hit, maybe. That's why the numbers can be skewed. And the AL is always like the hitting
well,
conference.
and I think you just touched on it. You can't pitch around guys in the
Oh, no.
AL.
Everyone can hit.
Even a 7-hitter. Like
Everyone can hit,
NL,
right.
you got to run around 3rd and 2 outs. You can pitch around 7. You can
Right.
pitch around
We
8.
can put
and
them
now
on, put them on.
Right, now
so
you
now
can fix
again,
the pitching.
a good National League player, aka Bonds, his numbers get inflated because they can pitch around.
No, I think because they can pitch around, his walk numbers get inflated. Yes.
But therefore, his win goes up because he's getting that .25.
But on the same token, if you can't be pitched around, you're getting better pitches to hit. So you would think your total bases would go up there by seeing pitches
And hit
that
him.
you can drive. So I think it averages out on that.
Oh, you guys said Chris Davis with the K. I thought you meant Orioles.
No, not Crush, not Orioles.
And the
Crush
heyday hit
Davis.
220 with 50 bombs.
Yeah. So the AL side, I mean, Mookie Betts is having, and it's going under the radar, historically probably one of the best offensive seasons in the history of baseball.
He's my
History.
for sure.
I mean, he is probably having a top 20 season ever.
Thank you, top 20. It was
Yes,
history.
yes.
We just talked about Barry Bonds. We just had
Right.
a moment of silence.
No,
for
Bonds is like 1 and 2 in those
All
2
right,
years,
all right.
but this is a top
Don't
20.
get
When you
crazy.
talk about how long baseball's been going, how many players there are, a top 20 season in history is good. And Trout, everybody thinks is just doing okay. He's second of any player based on this metric in the league of total value.
No, I'm just saying, like.
Yeah,
but
but
it's my
that's
Trout.
what
Like,
you
it's like
expect.
Trout's doing Trout things.
That's what you expect.
Mookie's good, but he's doing exceptionally well this year.
Right.
But now he's put a higher bar for him, so next year he can't do this because it's like, oh, Mookie.
Yeah.
Mookie Betts is, I think, probably the clear runner for the runaway for as far as.
Jose Ramirez had a really good year.
But
Ramirez did.
would you
okay.
say Mookie Betts is the best player in the league?
No, Mike Trout.
Are you talking season?
I'm talking about.
Or like if I had to take one on my team?
If you, that's. I mean, it's kind of a gray area. Like
Because if I was
who's
to
the
take
best
one on
player
my
in
team
baseball?
this season,
I said who's the best player in baseball?
Stop dancing around the question.
no, I mean I think overall Mike Trout.
Exactly. So that's.
But he's not the MVP in my mind
No,
this
I
season.
understand. Yeah, I understand.
So
I also think
it should
that-
change from not most valuable, like you said, because most valuable is probably Trout or DeGrom. Like the
Right.
numbers don't lie.
The
'Cause
names are
without Mookie,
best-
they still won like 90 games.
Best season award.
You know, you say something like that.
Yes.
Best statistical
Yes.
season or something. Like
Right.
But my thought on Trout too, and this is a hot take, and I know that.
that. Let's go.
But
Start cooking.
I love Mike Trout. I
Doesn't
absolutely
sound
love
like
him.
you're about to lay a hammer on us.
If you are Mike Trout, how do you never make the playoffs? And don't tell me you don't have any talent around you. And I'm not saying this is Mike Trout's fault, because baseball is a game where you need other people.
You need teammates. It's like football.
You need teammates.
Because they can
But
pitch around
how are
him and all that.
how are we all going to sit here and say Mike Trout is by far the best player in baseball, and he's been in the league for 6 years and has never played in the playoffs?
Why
I think that actually proves why
isn't
he's the
Jacob
best
DeGrom in the playoffs?
No, I think that proves
But
why.
he has been.
But why isn't he right this year?
I think
He
that's
had,
his
he
team
had arguably the greatest pitching season ever.
You said his team sucks.
Yes.
Mike Trout's team sucks. He can still be the best player.
But the Orioles, the A's have had talent.
Do you remember the Lakers? when they
I
had,
can't even
You're
figure
flustered.
out.
Do you remember
the
Mike Trout?
Angels
Yeah.
have had talent.
Do you remember the Lakers when they had Kobe Bryant, Karl Malone, and all those guys? Remember
Okay,
those?
if you're talking Malone on the Lakers, you
Okay.
can't count
No,
him as-
but they had.
He's not the
No,
mailman.
but they
He's
had.
not.
They
No, he's
had
putting
that
things through.
He's the
roster.
retired. Yeah,
They had
retired.
that roster and they
You
didn't
can.
win. It's just because the team together sucks. They just suck.
So if the team together sucks, is it a Mike Trout issue of him not being a good teammate?
I have no issues with Mike Trout. Mike Trout can win MVP every year for me.
It proves that he's the best player because he's putting up these stupid numbers with no help. And
Yeah.
in baseball, you can still pitch around
Yeah.
because no one can hit behind him. He's going to see curveballs. He's going to see a lot of dirt.
I think it proves one thing. I think it proves that Mike Scioscia is maybe the worst manager
He is.
Doesn't he
in
win
all
rings,
of
though?
baseball.
He won one ring though, right?
Huh?
0-1 with Salmon and all that.
Salmon
He beat the
and
Giants.
Salmon and
Hey,
Evans.
again, they had no studs.
No.
There's something to it. When
And
you have a
John Lackey
stud, when
was
you have the best player,
They had John Lackey. They had a great team that year.
because they're a bunch of above average. They had no Bonds. Bonds again was the best player, and he didn't win.
Tim Salmon though.
Again, no one really knows that.
But I think Trout can debunk that by taking the salary that he has. If he gets a manager that knows how to manage, there's still enough money there to bring in other really, really good talent around him, because he took a salary of an above average player, but not a best
Elite,
player.
and that's why I like Trout too.
I love him.
See,
I personally
The
love
He
problem
just
Trout.
wanted
with
to play
asking
baseball,
like
just
why
sign and
can't
go.
the problem with asking why can't Mike Trout make it to the playoffs insinuates that the reason they're not making the playoffs is because of Mike Trout.
Right. That's
What
crazy.
else can Mike
You're right, that's
Trout
crazy.
do?
It's
He can't
not
do
because
much
of
He
that.
can't do much.
That just
He can't do
proves
much.
how good he is.
So that just shows that it is an overall team game.
Yes.
Also, the A's, the Mariners. It's a pretty tough division. The Rangers were good like
Yeah.
what, 4 years ago?
Right.
They made
And-
back-to-back World Series.
And
Yeah.
the thing is, when
That's
we
tough
look
division.
at numbers, and there's old school people that hate numbers, that are all like, they don't matter, it's the eye test.
They don't matter why we
It's the
record
eye
them.
test.
Why we record them if they don't matter?
Right, well, but you can just tell, you can listen and you can tell it's the eye test.
Sometimes you can, yes.
And I'm not against a manager playing his gut every once in a while. Numbers you're not always going to win based on numbers. And if you did, baseball would be boring. I mean, you're gambling.
The A's
That's all
would be
you're
boring.
doing. You're playing odds, you're choosing, and you're gambling.
Right.
But when we're looking small market, big market of how to win, what Theo Epstein did in Boston was take a small market mentality of Moneyball and essentially implement that while being able to spend big dollars on guys.
Core guys.
Core guys. And then obviously win, and then go and do the same thing with the Cubs because there's a formula there.
Right.
That really Billy Beane and that team over with the A's was able to develop and master before these
Right.
others took it. But one of the most underrated scenes in the movie Moneyball is when they're sitting watching film, and most people it just flies under the radar, but they watch film of Kevin Youkilis in the minors, and he's hitting. He's got his weird batting stance, and Beane tells the guy, his assistant, I can't remember his name right now, but tells him, like, we got to go after this guy. And he said, no, they won't get rid of him. Because the Red Sox at that time were so smart, too. They were doing all the same stuff. They were just
Right.
a little behind. But they were not going to give up on Youkilis because they knew he gets on base, he
Right.
slugs at a high
It's
level,
above the
it's
eyes.
total bases.
Beyond the
Right.
eyes.
So, but most people don't relate, okay, that was the Red Sox, and then, 2 years later, the Red Sox win it. And Youkilis was a big part of that.
Right.
They were not
Like I
going to
said,
get rid of
That's
him.
smart. Like I said, when the teams that don't have the bankroll, like when you have the short stack, you have to find ways to get the big stack. It's scary when the big stack thinks like the little stack.
Right.
Then you guys are indestructible, like what
Right.
the Red Sox did with the Cubs.
And I think that's where the Yankees, if you can call them struggles, have struggled
Right.
in the last
They
10
just kept
years.
pushing their way in
because
getting
they
all
just
of it, yeah.
they just want to
Money,
buy them.
money,
Just
right,
keep
right.
buying,
You
keep
can't do that.
buying.
You can buy them, but you got to buy the right players. You can't just throw
Right.
money at your problems.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
the only league that you can
Mhm.
recruit this way.
No sign.
It's the only way you can do that.
I
Like,
love
I would
it.
love to be able to have
I think it's the only sport you could do it.
A
Make
15
it
or
fair.
a 15 or 16-year-old team that we based all this off of, but you just can't. Colleges can't even recruit guys that way. They have to go off of the intangibles. They have to go off of the, the guy that does the radiate across the diamond. But it's just interesting that it is all one way until you get to the majors.
Think about it, just like in football. Boise State, Oregon, they weren't as big as the SEC, but they were what? We're small, we're fast. Spread them out, get them tired.
Yeah.
Now everyone's doing what?
Right.
The spread.
Yep.
The Moneyball thing.
Yep.
That's what happens. All right, and like I said, Alabama, we're talking about a little football, but they're going to be unstructured.
Right.
Because
Oh,
they
yeah.
had the talent, and now they're thinking like the smaller teams,
Exactly.
and they're big.
And it's interesting to relate that back to the travel ball level, because I think why a lot of travel organizations fail is because they try to be other organizations. They're not big scale. Right when you start, you are not a big market team that can go out and just get players. So you have to get guys that have a little bit less tools, but that you know you can develop and they can get on base and they can find ways to do these things.
Yeah,
And you play Moneyball, and over time, then you start to get the bigger name guys. But there's a lot of guys out there that look at themselves as a player who isn't elite, that can be an elite player if they're just taught the right way of what to focus on. You know, I mean, instead of the focus being, hey, you're not hitting enough doubles, why isn't it? What's your total bases? How are we getting on base? Are you stealing bases? What are you creating?
There's more in the game, like you said, right?
There is, and we miss a lot of it focusing on what ESPN focuses on, and that's the sexy stats, and that's awesome. I don't want to, I mean, honestly, if SportsCenter showed me all the singles or
A million
walks in the game,
singles,
if
yeah.
it was like, oh, I got walked for the third time this game, like, this is boring, I don't want to watch that. So for a casual fan, I get it.
Yes.
But when you look at it as a whole of who's really the most valuable, I think we miss a lot when we talk the MVP award, and then we give it to the guy with the best slash line, and that's it, or the best home runs and RBIs.
Right. Do you think
Well, that's
distance should matter
circumstantial.
in home runs?
Distance?
Do you think if it goes over 500 feet,
It goes far enough
you
to
get
get
like
over
a
the
half,
fence.
you get like a half home run? Like this guy has 1.5 home runs this year. It's like, oh shit, that guy hit a bomb. That dude hit a bomb. You know what I'm saying? Like if there were
Right.
halves, you know, like this
No,
dude hit
half
a
of the
bomb.
home run's a double, so I'm out.
You're out.
Right.
All right, just,
I'm out.
that was just-
I don't
But I do
Just to
like
say.
that fences can be different sizes, and I think that's a cool part of the game.
Okay.
That like you go to a different place,
It adds
bases
flavor,
and
right?
mounds the same, but like
Breaks
the
up
fence is
monotony.
different. Yeah,
Right.
it's kind of cool.
You can go high and go low.
Right. Think about that if like a basketball court and like goals were different sizes. You know,
Be interesting.
it'd be interesting.
It'd be a lot interesting.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Different.
Right.
If you have a really short team, make it really short.
Same thing with
right?
football. Like, what if certain stadiums they were like wider, and then they had some that were like 70 yards? You know what I mean? Like that's what baseball
it would
does.
change the strategy.
It's still 10 yards for a first down. You know, you keep the rules the same, but
only part of the field is uniform. You can customize a lot of other things. Bigger foul territory.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I do like
bigger
that.
fences.
I like
Why
that.
do you
a
think
lot.
that is? Back in the
I
day,
don't know.
They had a bunch of space, or some teams didn't have as
Maybe
much
lack
space.
of space and lack of
Right.
being able to purchase
They're
stuff.
like-
Like you look at some of the old stadiums, and
Oh
they
my
were
God.
so they're
They're so tight in the
Some of them
city,
were
right?
tight, and then some like left and right were there, but then it was just
You're
straight, like
what,
deep
what
out
was
the
this guy
center.
drinking that day?
Yeah, but it's like
Right.
600 feet to dead center, and some of it was probably like what land was available.
At the
And,
time.
yeah, so it's kind of interesting to see, but I do like that piece.
So when you guys are talking about the like Moneyball aspect,
Mhm.
do you believe that the younger players are rookie contracts and they're there for 6-7 years with a minor league deal, and that's why arbitration comes? Like Brian made
Yep.
what, I think $1 million this year because he's like, yo, I just got MVP and I'm still making 500,000.
Right.
Whereas a 34-year-old veteran not doing anything or hitting like 220 making 10-20 million a year. Do you think the players should get paid earlier, or should there be smaller rookie deals like in football and basketball where they can get paid?
I'm
Because
all
like,
for the players getting as much money as they possibly can.
and they do, but that's
whatever
usually
that
when
means.
they're like 28, and that means they
Right.
get one. Whereas
Well,
basketball players come in 18,
Right.
they get 23.
Well, I think it's probably
28,
arguable
and 33.
that, I mean, aside from injuries, but,
Right.
you know, a lot of these guys that are in those contracts that are small,
Mhm.
they're probably in their prime, and you're not getting paid like your prime.
Exactly, I think it's a problem. But as the flip side, the owners love it because
Oh,
like
yeah,
we're
right.
paying
Sure.
pennies on the dollar
Right.
for Brian's productivity, and then like when you're 29 and you want to get paid, we're like, nope, we're good.
Don't get me wrong, it's the right business decision, but it sucks.
But it sucks for the players. That's why you see a lot of the imports are what 14,
Mhm.
16. So that clock starts. So when they're in their prime, they're what 21,
Right.
get a big deal. They're 28, get another big deal.
I think baseball's behind in the sense that we pay players for what they've done
True.
versus paying them for what we expect them to
Projected,
do.
right?
Right.
And when you look at a job, like if you're paying me to do a job, I'm expecting that you're paying me for what I'm going to do
About
for
to do
you,
for you, right?
not for what I've just done in the last 3 years. And that's what baseball does. You're
Right.
paid for previous production,
Right.
which is backwards. But
It's good for the players too
It's
when
good.
they get it because guaranteed.
That's why Le'Veon Bell isn't getting paid.
And he's like, yeah. Well, he's like, what are you doing?
And he's also not getting me wins in fantasy right now.
I
So
know, great
again,
win.
shout out to Adrian Peterson for
fantasy
picking up the
football.
slack.
Oh my God.
Right.
I love that.
When I need that, and I can never get into fantasy baseball; it's too long.
No,
so I
it's-
do get
it's
like
ridiculous.
the routine fan of baseball, not liking it as much during the season. But
Right.
No way.
interesting to see, and it's interesting time of the year where next week we're gonna talk through. I think next week playoff stuff a little bit.
Preview.
But this last week of the season's gonna be
Right.
I'm
crazy
getting a
to
little
see.
hot take. Brewers, wild card team. You usually win it.
I'm not
Do you
going
think
to-
they're gonna be the wild card?
I just want to say I picked the Brewers to win the division at the beginning of the year, and I still think it's going to happen.
You should have picked up the bet too. I had it about a month ago.
Yeah.
I think
When I
we're gonna
said A's
have.
was close, I said Mariners.
You also said
A's and Mariners.
you also wanted to bet that the Cubs would win 100 games this year, and I said that wasn't going to happen, but I didn't take the bet.
I'm counting on a 3-way tie for the wild card, or a 2-way tie for the Central Division, and a 2-way tie for the wild card, where we have to play 3 separate games before the playoffs,
Right.
after the regular season.
Why would you want that?
I just want crazy.
As a
More
Cubs
base,
fan.
it's free baseball.
Yeah, but more chances are you're gonna.
Right, but think about it. If the
That's
Cubs tie for the division, we have to play for the division championship. If we lose, we still go and get to play for the wild card.
Right.
If we're all tied. So, I don't know. I like Cubs playing Milwaukee in a series.
Right.
I think it's good for baseball. It's good for that rivalry, even though Cole Hamels isn't for it. And it's great for travel. It sets up the winner of that series in a great way for that next series.
Who's
You're
the-
just going Chicago, Milwaukee.
Who's the other
versus Atlanta and LA.
Who's the other
Just-
Cardinals?
Cardinals.
Really?
Yeah,
They
Cardinals
were on
are
late.
late.
Well, because
Because
Cardinals.
Cardinals are how
And
close
Rockies are close. Rockies are a game and a half.
close.
Rockies are a game and a half behind the Dodgers in the division, and a game and a half behind the Cardinals. But Cardinals and Milwaukee are playing in a series
Dude,
right now.
The Rockies are the middle.
I'm rooting for the Rockies.
They're
I
not gonna
like
do it.
watching the Rockies.
Have they made the playoffs since 05 when they lost to the Sox?
They haven't won their division in a long
That's
time.
what I'm saying. They're the middle child.
I love
They
the
get
Rockies.
close,
Right.
Not close enough.
I always look back to it's very interesting that the Cubs had DJ LeMahieu. Most people forget that he wasn't very good, and then he's like hitting like 320 to
He can't get out
340
now.
every year for the Rockies.
Right.
So there's that
They
piece.
have some great hitters on
But
the team. Kind of rubs off. Hitting is
It
contagious.
is. It's at course. Isn't that the excuse everybody makes?
Of course.
That helps you hit the ball.
Right. It's
Yeah.
just like I go in the stadium, I can now hit
Just like
330.
steroids also help you put the ball in play. I don't know if you knew that, but if you
Oh,
take
is that-
steroids,
is that-
We're
We're
gonna have to
you're
do
a better
talk about
hitter.
steroids. I think we're really gonna have to talk.
I think we do.
I think we need to. Do we want to do a part 2 to this, or continue it, or what? I think there's a lot we can go real deep on stats for sure.
We definitely
I do
could.
have
I mean,
lessons in 4 minutes.
oh, lessons in 4 minutes. That's
Do you have
good.
lessons in 6?
No, I'm good.
I do. I'll let you guys can if you guys want to continue on the stats train, you can.
So, you got 4 minutes.
I got 4
You
minutes.
got 4
let's-
minutes.
If
You better do it now. It's gonna
So,
cost you guys.
so let's do this. If you had to pick a National League MVP, who would it be?
Christian Yelich.
Christian Yelich, and
And,
that's
this is
and
why.
that's what would have been the same based on the match.
Right, but
Okay.
mine's
You're really
also-
promoting your win.
But right,
Your
but
metrics.
my
I think it's a great
Like I
metric.
said,
Let's
my-
just tweet. What's his name?
All right,
Kirsten.
my 3 things that I look at immediately are batting average, on base percentage, and strikeouts. The sexy thing is home runs. That's the big thing. That's going to help people decide. But I only pick home runs when I've got 2 guys that are very, very close on those other stats, and I need something to set it over the top. I would look at RBIs before I'd even look at home runs.
Okay.
I just really, really would.
But you do believe in what we said, where there's a slight sliding scale of the more power, there's probably going to be a few more strikeouts that you're okay with, leeway wise.
I
Not many, but you get that like more power leads.
Yes, I know that exists, but I would much if I had to pick a guy, I'm picking a guy with a higher average, and that without that. Is what
Okay.
I'm saying. So I would much rather have a guy that, because we talk about total bases and putting pressure on the defense,
Sure.
putting pressure on the pitcher. John Lester isn't more comfortable at any other point in his life than when a guy's on first base.
Okay.
So I'll take a guy that can get a single. More like the 340 guy. That's why I would take Jose Altuve before
Okay.
Bryce Harper. Any
So-
day of the week.
So American League, we'll get through Adams, then I can stay.
I'm just
we
saying.
can-
Who won MVP? 1 or 4?
Oh, well, hold on. AL MVP, who would you choose?
Who would I choose?
Yeah.
It's Mookie Betts.
Mookie Betts also matches the win rating.
Right.
Is
What's his
Mookie
batting
Shameless
average? Does anybody
plug,
know his
this
batting
guy.
average?
340.
Exactly,
Yep.
340. Yeah, he just so happens to be hitting a lot of home runs this year. He even
Short
said,
porch.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he even said,
Shout
I'm
out
not a
Sam
home run.
Travis,
He
first
even
home
said
run.
in the home run derby, he's like, I'm not a home run hitter. They're going over the wall right now.
Oh, because the
Yeah,
wall's
right.
300 feet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
you ain't fooling nobody.
Yeah, nobody. No, it doesn't matter.
I can piss over that wall.
So
It's over the fence. It's all that matters.
those would be my two choices. I think that they're runaways for sure. I don't think Javi Baez deserves to be in there. As far as I think Nolan Arenado should be higher.
I agree.
Because I think Nolan. How many times Nolan Arenado has struck out 119 times? Javi struck out 158 times. That's a lot of outs, gentlemen. I don't like
It is.
outs, even though I'm okay with bunting.
You only get 27.
Huh?
You only
You
get
You only
27.
get 27. You can
That's what you
score as many
should've
runs as you
either.
want, but you're limited to how many outs
Talk
you
about
get.
that later.
So without giving away, because I want your opinions on this too, and I know Adam has to start lessons, but without giving away who won what, and I'll tell
Oh
you.
yeah, I never knew.
No,
I didn't go. I didn't get an invite.
Yes, you did. You
I don't
asked.
think
I don't care what they talk about when I'm gone. The MVP of the organization last year won it rightfully, and it should not change. That's all
Oh,
I'm
it's
saying.
definitely not going to change.
Yeah, it's
I
not, no,
think
it should have changed. And
No,
it's
it will
not, what I'm
change.
saying
I got
is it's
you.
not wrong.
There were two very deserving.
There were two very deserving deserving ones, but
I would have done the Kanye. I would have came up with the award.
There were actually looking at it, probably three really deserving people.
You
After
know what?
putting this
Everyone
together,
gets MVP
but-
now. What? It's 2018.
Yeah.
Everyone gets a trophy.
That's what we should be doing. Is just giving an MVP
Just give them
to
away.
everybody.
Right. Everyone's a winner.
Most valuable person.
Good Lord.
You
Most
did it.
valuable people.
Yeah, but most
Plural.
valuable people.
Plural.
You all did it.
Well, thanks for tuning in, BAM fans. My hair's better than Jake's. Justin, appreciate you being here.
Oh, yeah.
Let's
And I'm
talk.
still Bush League, but
That's fine.
but I'm not mean to children. That's all I'm saying. So,
Hey, we were the same age when we were playing.
so next
That's
week,
right.
we're talking playoff previews.
I think that would be
Go
the way to
Brew
do
Crew.
it,
That'd
right?
be the way to do it. I guess we don't really even know what the end of the schedule is. I know the Cubs have the Pirates right now.
We'll do one of the
and
next
they end
two.
with the
Yeah, you
Cardinals.
guys have easy schedule.
So next season,
So it's gonna be a panel, or is it just like a double team usually?
No, it'll be a panel.
I know, but you have your seat apparently. So
All right.
yeah, that is
Right
what
on.
it is.
We got a lot
Good
of
job.
good content coming.
So I'm gonna walk out this way so you guys don't look at my butt.
I'm gonna rotate this table so we can.
Oh, there we
Oh
go.
my God. Jake wants his seat back, is what he's saying. So.
No. I think we're all right. Now that Adam's gone, let's.
We're gonna get our close-ups.
This will be good.